Good day, everyone, and welcome to another chapter for General Microbiology. So, for this lesson, we are going to discuss a new topic about the microbial nutrition, growth, and metabolism of different microorganisms. So, first, let's discuss microbial nutrition and cultivation. So, among the many elements that are present in your microorganism, carbon is the central component or the main component of biological macromolecules. So when you say macromolecules, these are big molecules such as your protein as well as um, carbohydrates. Okay? So carbon is present in your microorganism. And carbon can be incorporated into biosynthetic pathways and may be derived from either organic or inorganic sources. So some organisms can derive it from carbon dioxide, while others require their carbon in ready-made organic form. Okay? So other microorganisms, they derive their carbon in the form of carbon dioxide. Okay? And others, they require their carbon in ready-made organic form. Okay? So in addition to carbon, hydrogen is also a key component of the macromolecules. So hydrogen also participates in energy generation processes in most microorganisms. So for example, in autotrophs, hydrogen is required to reduce carbon dioxide in the synthesis of macromolecules. So again, both carbon and hydrogen is present in different microorganisms. On top of that, oxygen is of central importance to the respiration of many microorganisms. But oxygen is in its molecular form O2. So O2 can be toxic in can be toxic to some forms. Okay, so microorganisms obtain the oxygen they need for the synthesis of macromolecules from water. So we have here the different elements found in living organisms. So we have discussed carbon, which is can be found in the form that it usually supplied as carbon dioxide and another organic compounds. Okay, so it is a component of all organic molecules, especially carbon dioxide. Okay, so apart from carbon, we also have hydrogen. Okay, hydrogen peroxide, as well as different organic compounds. So hydrogen is a component of biological molecules with your H plus being released by the acids. So when you have higher H plus or higher electrons of your hydrogen, basically it is released from the different acids. Okay, so we also discuss oxygen. What are the forms that contains oxygen? So we have O2, we have water and other organic compounds. So oxygen is a component of biological molecules and it is required for aerobic metabolism. So when you say aerobic metabolism, okay, so when you say aerobic metabolism, this is the process where the cellular respiration of your microorganisms will require oxygen for them to produce various energy. Okay, so apart from carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen being discussed earlier, we also have other elements such as your nitrogen, okay, which is a major component of your proteins, as well as nucleic acids. And then we also have sulfur, okay, which is again another component of proteins, as well as an energy source for some bacteria. So what else? We also have phosphorus that can be found in nucleic acid and in adenosine triphosphate. okay, or ATP, which is the energy produced during your synthesis or cellular respiration, okay? So what else? You also have potassium, that is important in intracellular ion. We have sodium, which is important in extracellular iron, as well as your chlorine. Then we have calcium, that is a regulator of cellular process, as well as magnesium and iron. Okay, so those are the different elements that can be found in living organisms, as well as different microorganisms. So we have here the table showing to you the different growth factors and its functions. Okay, so we have here amino acids, which is a type of proteins. Okay, so your amino acids, it can be essential or either a non-essential. So it is a major components of proteins. Okay, so again, the major component of proteins in microorganisms basically contain different amino acids. Okay, so what else? We also have here para-amino benzoic acid, which functions as a precursor of folic acid, which is involved in different nucleic acid synthesis. Okay, so what is the precursor or pre-requirement for your folic acid? That is the para-amino benzoic acid. Okay, so we also have here another growth factor, which is niacin or nicotinic acid. Okay, so that is a precursor of NADP plus as well as NAD plus. Okay, then we have purines and pyrimidines, which is a component of nucleic acids. And we also have here pyridoxine or vitamin B6 that is used for amino acid synthesis, as well as riboflavin or vitamin B2, which is a precursor for your FAD. Okay, so many microorganisms, uh, they are unable they are unable to synthesize certain organic compounds necessary for growth and must therefore be provided with them in their growth medium. Okay, so when you say growth medium, that is the medium where your microorganism grow. For example, sa bread, so your bread there, which different molds will grow, that bread will serve as a growth medium for your microorganisms to grow. So without the bread where microorganisms will utilize it for them to grow, then the different microorganisms will unable to synthesize different compounds necessary for their growth. Okay, so without a growth medium, your microorganisms will not synthesize. Okay, so they will not grow. Okay, so these are termed growth factors. Okay, so the different growth mediums, these are termed as your growth factors. So your growth factors can have three main groups, which can be identified as amino acids, okay, purines and pyrimidines, okay, both that are required for nucleic acid synthesis of your microorganisms, and vitamins. Okay, so those are the three main groups for the required growth factors for your microorganisms for them to be able to synthesize certain organic compounds that are necessary for their growth. So I hope you will remember these three, as well as their functions. Okay, so those are the different microbial growth factors that are needed for your microbial growth. So again, your amino acid, um, it contains nitrogen. Okay, so you have here, so in this table you can basically found here, you can basically see here that the major element in your nucleic acid is nitrogen. Okay, so those are the different microbial growth factors which are needed for the microorganisms to be for them to synthesize. Okay. Then now we will discuss different nutritional categories. So microorganisms can be categorized according to how they obtain their carbon and energy. Okay? So as we have seen, carbon is the most abundant component of the microbial cell, and earlier I have discussed to you that carbon is the principal molecule component in the macromolecules of your microorganisms. Okay? So not only that carbon is the most abundant component in the microbial cell, it is as well the most it is the most important molecules where microorganisms can obtain their carbon in the form of organic molecules, okay, that can be derived either directly or indirectly from other microorganisms. So we have here the different categories of microorganisms based on how they obtain their carbon as well as energy. Okay, so what is the first category we have here for the microorganisms based on how they obtain their carbon and energy? So we have here heterotroph. Okay, so these microorganisms must use one or more organic compounds as its source of carbon. Okay? So heterotrophs, for example, we have here almost all types of bacteria. Okay? All fungi and protozoa are heterotroph. Okay? So they must use one or more organic compounds as their source of carbon. Okay? So heterotrophs again includes all bacteria as well as your fungi. So fungi can be yeast as well as your molds. Okay? So we have there heterotroph. What else? We also have autotroph. So autotroph can derive its carbon from carbon dioxide. Okay? For example, we have plants, all of algae, okay? So, tanan na algae, and some bacteria, okay? So, we can also categorize microorganisms nutritionally by the way they derive the energy they require to carry out essential cellular reactions, okay? So, furthermore, in addition to autotroph, we can categorize microorganisms as well based on how they derive the energy they require to carry out different cellular reactions. So what are those cellular reactions? We have glycolysis, which is the conversion of your sugar to pyruvate molecules um, to release the energy. So without glycolysis, your microorganisms cannot grow because wala naman naga-produce energy. Okay, so they utilize sugar as the main form of the main component in which it is broken down with the help of different enzymes, okay, to be created as an energy. So again, microorganisms can be categorized um, in the way how they require energy to carry out different cellular reactions. Okay? So autotrophs can either be categorized as chemotroph or phototroph. Okay? So chemotroph obtains its energy from chemical compounds. Okay? So chemotroph obtain their energy as well as their carbon from inorganic sources, and they do this by oxidation of inorganic molecules such as sulfur or nitrate. Okay? So again, your chemotroph, they obtain the energy from different chemical compounds. So we have here one example that chemotroph obtain their energy from inorganic sources, as well as the oxidation of different inorganic molecules such as sulfur or nitrite. Okay? So, again, one category of autotroph is your chemotroph, as well as we have here phototroph. Okay? So, in addition to chemotroph which uses chemical substances, your phototroph, from the word itself, photo means light. Okay, so the phototroph microorganism, they use light as a source of energy. Okay, so light as a source of energy. So autotrophs have photosynthetic pigments, enabling them to convert light energy into chemical energy. Okay, so what part of the cell they conduct different photosynthetic activities. So basically in the cell wall of the microbial cell. Okay? So again, the different categories of microorganisms based on how they obtain their carbon as well as energy can be categorized as heterotroph, okay, which most of your microorganisms are okay, the bacteria as well as fungi, which includes molds and yeast. They are heterotroph, as well as we have here another category, autotroph. Okay, autotroph again can be categorized either chemotroph or phototroph. Okay, so those are the different nutritional categories where your microorganisms can be categorized. Okay. So now let's discuss how do nutrients get into the microbial cells. Okay? So we have discussed the different parts of eukaryotic as well as prokaryotic cells. We will now discuss how do different nutrients get into or get inside the microbial cells. Okay? So a microorganism must have some means of taking it up from the environment. Okay? So, different microorganisms must have the means or kakayahan to take up nutrients from the environment. Okay? It can either be, they can either get the nutrients from the light, okay, from their growth medium or growth factor, any any source, as long as they have the means to take up the energy from take up the nutrients from the environment. Okay, so in addition to their means to taking up of nutrients in the environment, microorganisms must also process or possess the appropriate enzyme systems to utilize it. Okay? So not only that the microorganism has the means to take up or to absorb nutrients from the environment, the microorganisms also has different enzymes. These enzymes catalyze or break down those bigger molecules, okay, into different products for them to be able to utilize it. For example, I have mentioned earlier, in the conversion of sugar to your to energy, again, microorganisms have specific enzymes for that, okay, which help, okay, so which aids on the breaking down of your sugar. So without the means of taking the nutrients up from the environment, as well as without the presence of enzymes which break down or catalyzes different chemical reactions, then microorganisms cannot fully utilize the different microorganisms. So, hindi nila fully ma-utilize ang different microorganisms. So, just like humans, okay, just like humans, when we intake food in our system or in our body, for example, milk. So milk, may ara na siya lactose, okay? Milk has lactose. So when we intake milk, what enzyme breaks down the lactose is what you call the enzyme lactase. Okay, so lactase will break down lactose into smaller molecules para mas maabsorb sa aton body. Okay, so the same with the microorganisms, they have specific enzyme to break down those different nutrients from the environment for them to fully utilize it for their growth. Okay, so you are familiar with the plasma membrane of the eukaryotic as well as prokaryotic cell, di ba? So the plasma membrane, it can represents a selective barrier allowing into the cell only those substances it is able to utilize. Okay? So, it is where in the plasma membrane where the microorganism, the cells of the microorganisms has the ability to either select or reject those different substances that they need to utilize. Okay? So, kung hindi kailangan sa cell ang specific na substance or specific molecule, then hindi na siya pasudlon sa inside of the cell. Okay? So, the plasma membrane is um, the part of the cell where the selection of what goes inside the cell happens. Okay? So they will only select those substances that is needed for the cell. So those that are needed, basically, hindi na sila pasudlon sa imo cell. Okay? So this selectively is due in large part of the hydrophobic nature of the lipid bilayer. Okay? So now, so we have discussed how microorganism, um, how do nutrients get into the microbial cell. So again, nutrients get inside the microbial cell through your plasma membrane. Okay, through the plasma membrane, which represents a selective barrier. Okay, so now we will discuss how a specific substance can be transported across the cell membrane in many ways. Okay? So how can a nutrient be transported inside the cell membrane of your microorganisms? So before we discuss how different nutrients get inside the cell membrane of the cells of the different microorganism, discuss first or let's understand first how cell membranes regulate food consumption and waste, as well as how cell walls provide protection. Okay? So again, the outer layer of the cell is what you call the cell wall. So it maintains the rigidity of the cell. Okay? So what is the major component of your cell wall is that it has the different phospholipid bilayer or the cell membrane. Okay? So let's show this video once again para mas maintindihan nyo ang function of the cell membrane.
Stabilize the membrane and make it better at controlling what can pass through it. Proteins are another important part of the membrane. They do many functions. One of the most important ones is transporting materials across the membrane, especially if they have a hard time passing through the phospholipid bilayer. A fourth membrane component is carbohydrates. These are often involved in cell identification.
So I hope you get more information about cell membrane in that video. So again, this is your cell membrane which contains the phospholipid bilayer. Okay, so this is the phospholipid bilayer. So it has again the hydrophilic head as well as the hydrophobic tail. Okay, so we have here the hydrophilic head contains the phosphate head as well as the hydrophobic tail of the phospholipid contains a fatty acid tails. So it can have unsaturated and unsaturated fatty acids. Okay? So apart from the hydrophilic as well as the hydrophobic phospholipid, what you can see in the cell membrane are the different cholesterols. Okay, so as discussed earlier, may ara din cholesterols ang inyo cell membrane which stabilizes the form of your phospholipid as well as we also have here proteins. Okay? So ang protein dara nagagawas, nagasulod ang inyo larger um, either ionic or anionic molecules. Okay? So yes, we have here an ion, and then apart from protein, the phospholipid bilayer also contains the carbohydrate. Okay, so just by looking at this picture, um, the different cells of microorganisms again contain plasma membrane. So this is the yellow part. So what goes inside the cell is selectively chosen by your by the cell membrane. Okay, so the different phospholipid bilayer will select what goes inside and out of the cell. Okay, so if they need that specific substance, so technically the molecules will get inside or can pass through the cell membrane. Okay, and if not, hindi na siya i-receive sa cell membrane. Okay, again, this is the cell membrane, which the different nutrients can get inside of the cell of the microorganisms. Okay, so now let's go back on our topic on how a substance can be transported across the cell membrane. Okay, so a substance or a molecule can be transported across the cell membrane through either simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, as well as active transport. Okay, so we will discuss those different ways on how the substance can be transported in the cell membrane. So let's first discuss simple diffusion. So in simple diffusion, small molecules move across the membrane in response to a concentration gradient, okay, from high to low, okay, until the concentrations on either side of the membrane are equilibrium, okay? So again, for example, in the cellular in the simple diffusion, okay, if this is the phospholipid bilayer, okay, again damo sila, di ba, damo sila nga ga line here, and then you also have here another part, then ang inside of the cell is this part here. So simple diffusion is where the molecules can move across the membrane in response to their concentration. Okay, so when both of the side, this part here as well as the inner part of the cell are in equilibrium or balance na ang molecules, the concentration of the molecules, then um that is where the transportation of your nutrients stops. Okay? So once balance na ang concentration, okay, on either side of the molecules sa outside as well as the inner side of the cells, that is where the nutrients will stop, okay, getting inside and out of the cell. Okay, so that is for your simple diffusion. So you only need to take note that there is no cellular energy uh, expenditure, as well as during simple diffusion, larger molecules such as your glucose, which is a carbohydrate, and amino acids, which contain big nitrogen molecules, they are unable to enter the cell. So during cell simple diffusion, only simple molecules can move across the membrane. So either hydrogen or oxygen, as long as those are smaller molecules. Okay, so again, the larger molecules such as your amino acids or protein, they cannot get inside the cell membrane. Okay, so that is for simple diffusion. And then we have another method where the nutrients, how nutrients get inside the cell membrane is what you called here the facilitated diffusion. So in facilitated diffusion, larger molecules such as glucose as well as amino acids can enter the cell if they are assisted by membrane spanning transport proteins. Okay? So by the process of facilitated diffusion. So as you can see earlier, sa akon gipakita sa inyo na slide, facilitated diffusion is where the bigger molecules will get inside the transport proteins. Okay? It is assisted by the membrane spanning transport proteins. So let's get back again to that video. Okay? So for the facilitated diffusion, again, you have here a protein that facilitates the transport of different molecules outside of the cell into the cell membrane. Okay, so again, the cell membrane has phospholipid bilayer. This yellow part are the phospholipid bilayer, and it contains a protein. So protein will facilitate the diffusion of the larger molecules such as nucleic acid. So they can get inside here para mas ma-absorb sa inyo cell, as well as carbohydrates. Okay? So that is what you mean by facilitated diffusion. So the protein facilitates the transport between your larger molecules outside of the cell and then into the cell. Okay, so that is facilitated diffusion. So like enzymes, these proteins are specific, or they have single or small number of related solutes. So another parallel is that they too can become saturated by too much substrate. Okay, so when you say saturated, kung damo na diri gapas na mga molecules, bigger molecules from outside of the cell getting into the inside of the cell, then the protein can also be saturated. Okay, that is what you mean by the last statement there. Okay, note that as with simple diffusion, there is no expenditure of cellular energy and an inward concentration gradient is required. Okay? So we have discussed facilitated diffusion as well as simple diffusion. Now we have the last um the last um the last the last transportation process where the different substances get inside the cell membrane. Okay? So we have active transport. Okay? So in general, microorganisms find themselves in very dilute environments. Hence, the concentration gradient runs in other direction and diffusion into the cell is not possible. Again, microorganisms, you can find them in very dilute environment, meaning hindi siya concentrated. Um, hindi siya concentrated na environment. Okay? So, for example, you can find microorganisms in apologies, I cannot give one example for that. But you can find microorganisms in dilute environment na hindi saturated. Okay? So, the concentration gradient can run in other direction and there is no diffusion into the cell during the active transport. Okay? So, active transport will enable the cell to overcome this unfavorable gradient. Okay? Here, regardless of the direction of the gradient, the transport takes place in one direction only, into the cell. So energy derived from hydrolysis or the breakdown of your adenosine triphosphate energy is required to achieve this. And again, specific transmembrane proteins are involved. So just like your facilitated diffusion during active transport, where energy can be derived from your ATP, it uses again the transmembrane proteins, which transport the different nutrients from your outside of the cell into the inside of your cell. Okay, so in comparison to your simple as well as um, facilitated diffusion, active transport, they require cellular energy. Cellular energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate. So without adenosine triphosphate helping the nutrients to get inside the cell membranes, then there is no active transport. Okay, so again, active transport requires cellular energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate. Okay, so I hope you can remember the different ways on how nutrients is transported in the cell membrane, as well as this figure here para mas maintindihan nyo. Okay? So again, we have here example of facilitated diffusion, just like what I had in this video. So this is following facilitated transport, where you have one big molecule here. Okay, so for this example, we have here an area of high concentration. So, damo ka dire nutrients, damo ka substances. Okay? So, in facilitated diffusion, substances can move across the plasma membrane. They can get inside the plasma membrane by binding to an embedded transport protein. Okay? So, no energy input is required, but the diffusion can only occur from an area of high concentration to the area of low concentration. So uh, again, during facilitated diffusion, the bigger molecules such as your amino acid or protein, which are high of concentration, diri nga part taas silang concentration dira, they can get inside the cell through the embedded transport chain or embedded transport protein. Okay, so this one here, this is your phospholipid bilayer again, di ba? So this is your protein, embedded transport protein, and then the substance can get inside the embedded protein, okay, from coming from the high concentration to the low to the area of low concentration. Okay? So this diffusion process, it doesn't require energy, only the binding of your embedded transport protein. So this is the embedded transport protein. Okay? This one, embedded transport protein. Just like as this one, the same lang man sila. Okay? Can get inside from high concentration to the low concentration. So that is for your facilitated diffusion. So we have here the different factors affecting microbial growth. We have temperature, pH, oxygen, carbon dioxide, as well as osmotic pressure and light. Okay, again, these different factors affects microbial growth. Okay, so hindi magtubo ang imo microorganism kung wala si temperature, kung wala pH, oxygen, okay, carbon dioxide, as well as osmotic pressure. So these factors affects the degree of growth for your microorganisms. So I will discuss part 2 of this one for in the next slide or in the next video. Okay? So bye for now.